I'm here with Scott Dikkers of The Onion. Now, you purchased The Onion in 1989. What made you want to be involved with it, or you wanted to pick it up?
That's a really good question. We're going way back here. I was 20-something, 22 or something, and I had already helped found it and was sort of the acting editor, and the two guys who started it and owned it were kind of selling most of the ads and like running the business. And for the first year, I don't think they slept more than 2 hours a night because it's just like a lot of work to start a business, especially a weekly newspaper. And they decided to offer it to sale to me and two other guys, because I was their top editorial guy, and then there was their top sales guy, and then their top production guy. And when I say top, I mean only. So we decided that we would do that. They offered it to us for $16,000, and of that we had to come up with, I think, $3,000 down. So that was $1,000 each we had to come up with. I did not have $1,000, so I basically, you know, cashed in every bank account and scrounged together whatever I could, and managed to chip in my $1,000, and so did the other guys. You know, back in those days, it seemed like it was often I was spending my last dime on something, whether it was a meal that day or a newspaper. So it didn't seem like that big of a deal to like just, you know, go for broke and just put all your money into something. So you know, you're young and foolish, and but for whatever reason, it felt like the right thing to do, because it was like there's this thing that we had put so much effort in the first year, and yeah, I don't know if I ever really thought twice about it.
I mean, you must have had quite a gut instinct, because I'm thinking, you know, at my age, I wouldn't put $1,000 into a newspaper. Did you just have this concept that it was going to kind of blow up and become this, or? No,
we hoped in our highest hopes. Well, let me back up. There was not necessarily any gut instinct. It was more like we were running it. Like it was our job, and we didn't get paid, but it was our job. And so it was more like sort of putting your money where your mouth is. Well, I'm spending all my time doing this, I might as well, you know, put my money there, because if it fails, I'm going to fail big anyway. You know, it wasn't like I was you know, a business entrepreneur looking for opportunity and saying, oh, that looks like an interesting newspaper, I'll buy that. That wasn't what it was like at all. It was like a bunch of kids in a dorm room, and they had this thing, and it was pretty popular on campus after the first year. So it did seem like it was going places, and for a creative person, it was just an amazing soapbox to just do whatever you wanted to in this paper, and people would read it. You know, that before the internet, that was actually a really hard thing to find. But anyway, so yeah, your other question. I got off track and I backed up. It was...
what made you even want to create, like we'll go back farther than even just wanting to purchase it, just actually creating this paper. I mean, you were investing so much time and money into it, but why the initial idea?
It was a business venture for these two guys who started, and they invited me to help you know, come up with some of the editorial, like the cartoons and other stuff. Because I was actually a professional cartoonist in town at the time. I wasn't a student. The goal was take an 11 by 17 sheet of paper and put a calendar on it, like in 1 month in this student calendar, and then have a local cartoonist draw cartoons around it and then sell advertising around it. And these guys did this with a cartoonist friend of mine named James Sturm, and they put it out and made like $200 or $300, and they were thinking, this is great. So they were talking to me about doing another month, and it was just something they distributed on campus. Kids could get their calendar, and they could, you know, have some cartoons on it, you know, whatever. But when we started talking about it, the conversations quickly became, well, why don't we just do this every month? Wait a minute, why don't we do it every week? Just put a newspaper out every week. The calendar will be the center spread, and then you can do other stuff around that. And so that was the genesis of the idea. We're all thinking, this sounds like a good idea. Nobody knew how hard it would be. But I remembered your other question. You were asking, like, did I have any you know, foresight as to whether the Onion was actually going to be big or whatever. And I was saying our fondest hope was that one day the Onion would stand toe-to-toe with the Harvard Lampoon. because that was like the most famous college humor publication ever at the time. And that was all we aspired to. We just wanted to be a nationally known college humor publication. And it's funny because I think we actually skipped that step because there was a time when every funny kid in college wanted to write for the Harvard Lampoon or wanted to create a publication like the Harvard Lampoon. And then like in 2 or 3 years' time, somewhere in the mid-90s, was after we went online and started getting written up in national publications and stuff. Suddenly every college kid wanted to work at The Onion. And it wasn't considered a college humor publication because it was online. It was getting reviewed by The New Yorker, and we were on CNN. It was like every week there was some new thing when we were first becoming known. Yeah, it was totally unpredictable.
How did you go from the kind of like cartoons and ads to what you're doing now, which is the more like satirical, political, like actual
Yeah, that was
articles?
a very gradual evolution. The Onion has always been sort of evolving its voice, and it goes through, you know, swings of like doing humor a certain way and then doing a different way, and you know, it's going to keep changing too. So there's really no explanation for it. It's really just like the muse of the editors and writers. You know, we try to amuse ourselves every week, and so as soon as something starts to feel formulaic or not amusing to us, then it gets changed. You know, just organically, and that's always fun to see.
Okay. Today, people are getting their information almost as much as from the real news in these sort of comedy venues.
As
like,
well they should.
Like The Onion, you know, the Colbert Report, things like that. Why do you think people are turning to a more satirical news point as opposed to just watching, like, you know, MSNBC or Fox?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because we were talking to this guy from the MIT Media Lab the other day who is trying to get people interested in news that's important, what's going on in Africa, for example, or climate change and stuff like that. And it's just, I have this ridiculously intellectual answer for you, but it has to do with our basically the way humans are wired. You know, we're very short-sighted, and we don't have our brains are not wired to care about anything beyond our immediate sphere and our friends and our family and our little group. If something's making us laugh, you know, laughter is usually like a community thing. You're doing it with other people. You're sharing that with your friends. You know, we get a lot of Onion stories shared on Facebook. It's like kind of a big way that our stories are shared. Real news, like that's important, but that's not interesting or that's not funny. It's not going to make the cut for people who have it. Now, I think with all this social media, they have like a new excuse to sort of be sequestered into their little group of interests and you know, less engaged, I think, ultimately in what's going on in the world, even though everybody says social media is sort of like how we get engaged with that stuff. I don't see it happening. It really is just something fundamental about our wiring. You know, I'd rather laugh than eat vegetables, you know.
But are you, because you said, like, you know, you have people that want to kind of push the hard news, is The Onion a venue for that? I mean, it's kind of shaky ground when you want to, you know, people are reading you and you're influencing all these people and sort of showing them issues, but do you want to make jokes about Darfur? You know what I mean? Like, you're on such, like, walking a thin line there.
If, you know, there's ways to make jokes about anything, and if somebody, or if the audience at large knows about something, if it's sort of popped up into their radar, then you can make a joke about it. But if it hasn't, then you can't because nobody knows about it. And to me, that's really the only criteria. There's nothing like that's too sensitive or too...
There's nothing off limits.
No, there's nothing off limits, because as long as you're hitting the right target, you know, you can talk about anything. And there's usually a right target in just about any situation.
Have you run into issues before with taking a joke too far, or... What
do you mean by too far?
Well, I guess the way you're putting it, where if you think there is a right spot for everything, you can't really go too far, but, like, have you received any sort of backlash?
Oh yeah, people complain about our stuff all the time. And complaint letters, actually there's a form complaint letter that we didn't write, but somehow they have it. And anyone who writes a complaint letter writes the exact same letter, because it always starts with, "Let me start by saying I have a very good sense of humor." They always say that. Then they say, "For example," and then they'll list a few funny stories in the Onion that they liked. And then they'll say, "But this time with story X, you went too far." Mm-hmm. And it's usually a story that made fun of them, or something about them, or somebody close to them. Mm-hmm. So in a sense, they're saying that they can laugh at everybody else, but they can't laugh at themselves.
Right. So
we will continue laughing at them.
Mm-hmm. Do you ever have anything back from, politicians or people in sort of higher standing that you write about?
Sure. In the old days, before we were well known, those people would get really pissed mm-hmm. if we made fun of them and they saw it. But now that the Onion is known, it's a totally different ballgame. It's like being on Saturday Night Live. They're part of the conversation. They know that, like, PR-wise, it would be a mistake for them to get all upset about it. Mm-hmm. Everybody gets that except George W. Bush, because he got really upset that we were using the presidential seal as part of our weekly radio address feature. Mm-hmm. And he actually sent us a cease and desist letter and said, "You can't use that." And we just thought that was hilarious. So we sent him a letter back and, like, sent the exchange to the New York Times, and they, they were all over it, because, like, that's just gold. Mm-hmm. So, since then, no, nobody's really been stupid enough to get upset when we've made fun of them. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And finally, do you have a favorite Onion headline or Onion story, either during your time in editor-in-chief or, just in the sort of history of the Onion in general?
It's like asking me to name my favorite child. I cannot do it.
Right, but everyone has one, so...
No, they can't. What if the headlines found out that I had a favorite? I can't do it. Okay, I'll do it. I think my favorite headline is, it was Bush, our long national nightmare of peace and prosperity is finally over. It was, when he was elected in 2000, or was given the election in 2000, because basically the article laid out his plans for his time in office, mm-hmm. and it was just amazing. This writer of ours, Todd Hansen, wrote it. Every single thing in there came true. It was like this absolute prediction of the future. It was just like an amazing piece of work.
Okay. So. All right, thank you very much for your time.
Sure, thank you, Sean.